Rishi Sunak's hopes of pushing through a soft Brexit could come at the cost of party unity after he faced a significant backbench rebellion to his Windsor Framework bill. The 22 true Brexiteers who voted against as much maligned changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol were led by Tory heavyweights, including Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Priti Patel, Ian Duncan-Smith, John Redwood and Andrea Jenkins. And ERG number crunching has revealed that the PM's Northern Ireland deal would have actually failed without the support of the Ramona opposition because of 48 Conservative abstentions that wiped out Sunak's parliamentary majority. Meanwhile, former chair of the ERG, Steve Baker, was kicked out of their WhatsApp group for criticising Boris over his opposition as the Tory party descended into open civil war. Watch.
Today's measures are better, of course, than the protocol that Boris Johnson put in place, a protocol which he spoke about, and those things he said turned out not to be accurate. So, you know, he's got a choice. He can be remembered for the great acts of statecraft that he achieved, or he can risk looking like a pound-shop Nigel Farage, and I hope he chooses to be remembered as a statesman.
Mark, Francois, a very big day, lots to pick up on, but can you respond first to those comments from Steve Baker?
Well, look, Steve is an old friend of mine, so I'm not going to get into any kind of personal spat with Steve.
That seemed quite personal, though, didn't it?
Well, as I say, I'm not going to get into a row with Steve. All I will say is that whatever you think of Boris Johnson, I don't think he's ever been a pound shop anything. But Stephen is a friend of mine, so...
Who made the decision to boot him from the WhatsApp group? Was that you or someone else?
Absolutely not, no. I think there was a bit of a mix-up over the admin of some of these WhatsApp groups. No, of course I didn't.
Farage said earlier on his GBNews show that when it comes to Steve Baker, a ministerial role has seen him throw away his Brexiteer morals. Is that unfair?
No. I'm sorry, I think that is unfair. Look, Nigel Farage is as entitled to his opinion as anyone else. I've always gotten fairly well with Nigel, even when we've disagreed. Let me be clear, Steve Baker is one of my oldest friends in politics. He and I work very closely together in opposing Theresa May's ill-fated withdrawal agreement. Steve is still a friend of mine after today. We just happen to be in two different lobbies, but that can happen in politics.
So look, let's talk about the rebellion, because it actually is much larger than what it seemed at first glance, right?
Yes, so, you know, I'm a former senior whip, and there's an old thing, which is at the end of the day, go through the division list, because often the division lists, when you analyse them, tell a story. So what happened today? The government won, but they were always going to win. That was hardly a surprise, because the Labour Party had... Well, Keir Starmer offered to back it before he even knew what it was. Yeah. So that tells you quite a lot about, you know, Keir Starmer remains a Remainer and always will, in my view. So, 22 Conservative MPs voted against today, and I can come on to explain why in a moment. 48 other Tory MPs abstained. So 70 Conservative members of Parliament didn't back the SI on the Stormont break in the division lobbies. That's a pretty big number.
Isaac Levido, who is, of course, not someone that the public know, but a bigwig when it comes to electoral strategy.
Absolutely.
Recently said that the only way that the Conservative Party can win the next election is if there's unity. Now, even though I completely agree with this rebellion, I think the people who rebelled are the honourable Brexiteers. That's my personal opinion. You cannot deny, Mark, that this has sparked a new civil war in your party. Look at who rebelled. I mean, you've got three former leaders, IDS, Liz Truss and Boris Johnson. This is a new Brexit civil war, is it not?
No, forgive me, Dan. I think civil war's a bit strong. What happened today was there was a vote in the House of Commons on a statutory instrument about whether or not to implement the Stormont break. And 70 Tory MPs didn't vote for that. Compared to some of the events of the last few years, that is not civil war. That's not even a skirmish. But what I think it is important is why didn't those MPs support the break? We're always limited for time in TV interviews, but very quickly, the problem with the break is it was billed to us and many others as a veto.
It was oversold.
It completely was. Why? Very
Sunak.
Well, look, very quickly.
But it was, wasn't it? Well, it was Sunak who sold it, and he oversold it.
Well, I think some of the people around him were mainly responsible for the overselling. To use a medieval phrase, I think the king was badly advised.
OK, well, look, let's have a look at what he's said tonight about the vote, and I'll get you to respond off the
Sure.
There was incredibly strong support for the Windsor Framework, not just from my own party, but across Parliament. It passed very solidly with Conservative votes, and that's because it is a good deal. It is a good deal for the people, for families, for businesses in Northern Ireland. The Windsor Framework restores the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. It secures Northern Ireland's place in our union. It restores sovereignty, and for all those reasons, I'm pleased that it commanded such strong support.
So, Mark, let's be very frank about where Sunak stands when it comes to the ERG. He says you're irrelevant now. His people are briefing to the newspapers over the weekend that the ERG doesn't matter, that he doesn't give a damn that you're not backing this bill because he's going to force it through with the moderates in his party. And tonight, he makes it pretty clear that he isn't worried about the rebellion.
So I don't want to sound like I'm splitting hairs. It's not a bill. It was a statutory instrument. The government could have gone for a bill, a Windsor Framework bill, in order to bring these things in via primary legislation.
Of course, but the Stormont break is indicative of who would have voted for or against.
Well, they've chosen to do it via a variety of statutory instruments. One thing that your viewers might like to know is today was the first one. There could be up to a dozen more. So we could be going through this on multiple occasions.
Yeah, but how do you feel about what his people are saying about the ERG? You're irrelevant, he says. Now, I don't believe that for a single second. I think the ERG have a great heritage, and without the ERG, we wouldn't have the Brexit that we have today. But Sunak and his people think you no longer matter, that you're on the fringes of the Conservative Party.
Point one, I haven't heard the Prime Minister say that. I've been in politics long enough to say, oh, people are briefing on behalf of X.
But you must have read the stories over the weekend, though.
Yes, but I've been reading. We've been being told we're irrelevant for years. If we're that irrelevant, what am I doing on your show now?
Well, I don't think you're irrelevant for a single second.
Well, thank you very much, and hopefully your viewers don't either.
And clearly Boris Johnson and Liz Truss don't either.
And not IDS or Jacob Rees-Mogg or Andrea Jenkins or all these other people, or John Redwood or all Peter Bone and all these other people that you... So
the ERG fights on?
I think the ERG will continue, in a sense. Let me put it like this. Our job is to hold the government's feet to the fire on Europe-related issues. If you like, our job is to keep them honest. Now, they might see it slightly differently from that. But what happened today was 70 Conservative MPs did not support this desire for the Stormont break. I could go through all the...
so the death of the ERG is greatly exaggerated.
I think that's probably fair to say.
I just want to very quickly show you a little bit of Boris at the Privileges Committee today. Have a look at this.
Genuinely did not know what the outcome would be and was deeply shocked when fines were issued, not least since I had been told on a couple of occasions at least by Sue Gray that she did not think the threshold of criminality had been reached.
Now, Mark Francois, for a long time, you were a real ally of Boris Johnson. You turned on him right near the end of his premiership. How did you feel about his performance today?
Well, I'm not being coy. I didn't see it because I was rather up to my neck in all of this stuff.
Is this a witch hunt, a Privileges Committee witch hunt against the Prime Minister?
No, I wouldn't use that phrase. But, you know, Boris gave... I didn't see it, but the reports that I've heard is that he gave a fairly feisty defence, which is completely characteristic of him as a man. So...
Do you think he deserves to be suspended from Parliament?
Well, hang on, we don't know what the Privilege Committee... I think we're slightly jumping the gun there. We don't know what the Privilege Committee are going to conclude.
OK, in that case, do you think he intentionally or recklessly misled the House?
I don't think that he recklessly misled the House of Commons, but I'm not sitting on the privileges. So forgive me, Dan, but there is a process.
So you want to see the process play out?
I want to see the process play out. I want to see what the committee conclude. I want to see what their recommended sanction is, if any, and then we'll all have to decide whether or not to vote in it. But I think it would be jumping the gun to pronounce on that until the committee have had a chance to finish their work.